If you're creating a large environment, a nice way to give it a sense of scale is to add a small flock of birds in the background. This gives the viewer an immediate appreciation for the relative scale of the rest of the scene. Okay, let's start by modeling our bird. So with our cube selected, I'm just going to hit Control I to invert selection and just kill everything else. That's the light in the camera. And with our cube selected, I'm going to do Control 1. Jump over to our modifier tab while hovering over, Control A, and jumping into edit mode with tab. I'm just going to scale everything along the y-axis a little bit. I'm going to go to 2 for edge mode and bevel the edges out a little bit. Scroll up on my mouse wheel to add yet another edge loop. That looks good. Jumping into poly mode here and just selecting these 4 faces with Control and Shift. I'm going to use the proportional editing here as well. And I'm going to scale down the front. This will be where the beak is. Let's scale down the back while we're at it. This is no bird that I'm aware of existing, but you know, it's just a kind of generic shape we're working on here. So selecting these 2 edges at the back, it's going to E, Y, and S to scale out a wing. Let's just bring this edge up a little bit, just so we have a little bit more to work with when it comes with a silhouette. And I'm just going to move these in a little bit. It is always handy also to check out references whenever possible. I'm going to do this kind of blind at the moment, but we can check back in to see what a bird actually looks like and see how wrong we've got it. So I'm just going to select one side here, jump into the top view, and E for extrude. Going to add a couple of edge loops in there. Jump into point mode, sorry. Oops. Cool. Don't know what I did there. And let's just carve out the shape of a wing here. Something like, oh God, what am I doing? Okay, we're getting there, we're getting there. Okay, something like that. It's a bit of a chunky bird. Maybe we'll just sort of scale it down on the Z-axis a little. Yeah, anyway, that'll give you a nice silhouette. Just going to scale this out a little bit. Okay. I'm just going to select all of our mesh data here, hit F3 on the keyboard and do a search for symmetrize. Just check. I'm just going to do that again. Symmetrize, check this little tooltip down here in the bottom left and change from -Y to +Y. Cool, then we have our symmetry. Might do a little bit. Let's just switch on mirror mode here. Just going to do a little bit of moving things around a bit because it's looking kind of more like a fish than a bird at the moment. We could tweak this forever, but we're just going for the silhouette anyway, so I think we should be okay. All right, so we've got our bird. Now we need to select the seams because we are going to paint the texture on this. So I'm going to have 2 seams here, seam here, do Control E, mark seam, and one, let's just cut straight through the middle, Control E, mark seam. And now with everything selected, if we drag out another window, switch it to UV, we can do U on the keyboard and unwrap. Pretty good. We can see everything here. Let's try UV and pack islands with things selected. All right, do an amazing job. And I'm going to break out my add-on here, which is paid. That's a little bit better. Just increase the margin a bit. Really good add-on, highly recommend it. That should do. Okay, that's our bird. Let's give it a material. One already set up here. Let's just call it bird. And I'm going to drag out another window so we can see the shader layout. And we're going to add, search for an image texture, create new, keep those general settings. Let's just call it bird diffuse. Keep the alpha, color black, fine. Click OK and plug that into our base color and make sure it is highlighted here also. And what we are also going to do is take advantage of the alpha, which we will plug into, yes, you have guessed it, alpha. Now there are a few other things we need to check on our bird model, as we are keeping it very low polygon here. So this the wings and the tail have 0 thickness. We just need to check the normals. So if we go in face orientation, yeah, and our wings are a little bit off. So I'm just going to recalculate normals outside. This will help us when it comes to texture painting. And we're going to right click and shade smooth as well. Let's just switch off our face orientation. And with all that done, let's jump into our texture paint. Okay, in texture paint now, we're going to switch our blend brush setting here from mix to alpha erase. So on the edge of, I'm just going to switch to orthographic mode as well. On the edge of our wings here, I'm just going to erase the edges so we can add some nice silhouette, feather silhouette afterwards. Cool, that looks good. And I'm going to go from erase alpha to add alpha. Just go choose our fall off, make it a bit stronger, and just paint in a nice silhouette. Might be also handy to switch on wireframe here so we can see where we are painting. I'm just, oh god, doing this with a mouse. A tablet would of course be preferable, but I'm lazy. Okay, looking pretty good. Let's do the same for the tail. Whoop. Should be on by default as well, but you can see here we're also mirroring in the x-axis. Okay, pretty good silhouette already. Let's just clean a few little holes here. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's work on our color. I'm just going to switch back to mix. Now, if you paint with just mix, we're going to destroy our alpha. So the other option we need to check is affect alpha under advanced. I knew I would find it eventually. Yay, that's kind of better now. So let's go with a kind of brown color. I'm just going to go to flat view here so we can start painting in the effect we want. So I'm just going to give it like a base coat of this kind of brown color. Go. Da, 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 da. Let's get the underside as well. Cool. I'm going to go for, now let's go for a slightly brighter color here. Just going to change the fall off to something a little less harsh. as you can see, we can only paint on the, we can't paint on the inverse side of the normal. So we have to paint on the top here, which is fine. Cool. Okay, let's throw some eyeballs in there. And a bit of a beak. As you can see, we can be pretty rough. Let's just switch to screen mode, just get some highlights going on. Ooh, way too strong. And let's also add some drawn on feet for good measure. I'm just going to switch that back to mix mode actually. Oh god, again, graphics tablet, probably a good call. But you know, it's just to see it from the sky, so it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Okay, we have our model and painted texture of a bird. Actually, while I remember, it's always good to save the image. So our bird diffuse here, let's just do save. And we have our model all textured up nicely. It's not going to win any awards for being pretty, but then it's just for the silhouette really. So next thing we want to do is animate it. And to do that, we need to set up an armature. So with the cursor in the middle of the scene here, in the middle of our model, which if you don't know is Shift S, cursor to origin, we're going to do Shift A, and we're going to add an armature. We're going to go down to our viewport display and we're going to choose in front. Now by tabbing in, we can edit the armature. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, choose roughly where I think the bird's center of gravity would be, scale the rest of the bone up to the tip, duplicate our bone here and rotate it 180. And move it down to the base of our tail. Jump to the top view. Going to take our root bone here, duplicate it, rotate it 90. Going to stick it about here. And I'm going to move this in roughly where the edges are so it will deform nicely. And just extrude out the remainder of the bone here. Now what we can do also is rename these bones. So I'm just going to call this one with F2 on the keyboard, root, whoa, caps lock, root. And this one I'm going to call wing 1.r. This one I'm going to call wing 2.r. And this one I'm going to call tail. Cool. We're going to choose armature symmetrize. And as you can see, what it's done here is it's flipped it over the center. And also we have L suffixes added to our names, which becomes important when we pose the bird, which we're going to jump into very shortly. But before we do that, let's just set up some parenting. So these three will be child of select this, keep offset, and back into object mode, select our mesh, select our armature, Control P, automatic weights. And now we can jump into pose mode. It's Control Tab. And we should have a weighted model. Fantastic. Now I'm also going to switch on the mirror X here and the auto key. Let's just go back to frame 1 and set up our first keyframe. Exciting. So the first one is wings up. Go to frame 10. And the second one is wings down. When the wings are down, I think the bird would be lifted. The wings are up, it might drop a little bit of altitude. Tail feather, not entirely sure what it does. But let's just animate it a little bit anyway. Let's rotate it. When the wings are up, let's just go up as well. This will probably look wrong, but we can always correct it. Actually, let's do the inverse. Okay, cool. So those are our 2 keyframes. And let's just offset them slightly. So I'm going to offset these 2 by 4. So it really feels like a flap there. Now let's select all our keys, all our bones, sorry, with A on the keyboard. I'm just going to duplicate this and move it over to 20. And you can see how it's kind of looking. Let's duplicate this and move it over to 40. So I think these can move over perhaps even a little bit more. Nope, I was wrong. I think it's just the strength. Doesn't feel right. So let's correct that with our F curves in the graph editor. Let's just select and constrain so they move down a little bit more. Yeah, that feels nice. Okay, cool. We've got a few flaps there. And let's have a point in which all the bones revert to a kind of glide pose. So I'm just going to select everything A and do Alt R and Alt G. So it goes flap, 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 and glide. Just going to duplicate those over to frame 120. And then let's just begin the whole process again by selecting all of these keys. Shift D, move them over to, let's say, 130. And it starts flapping again. Brilliant. Now let's add a little bit of added dynamism by using F-curve modifiers. So let's start with our tailbone here. Let's select the, I think it's Z maybe? Yes. Hit N on the keyboard so we can select our modifiers and add noise. Let's just have this rotating round. So you get this kind of nice fluttery effect with the wind. That looks a bit extreme to me. Let's get it to 0.3 and scale it up a little. That looks pretty good. Maybe a little too strong. I'm just going to turn up the world opacity as well so we can kind of see what we're going to actually see. Looks kind of shiny too. Let's jump out, select our object, and just crank the roughness. Okay, looks good. Again, I think this is a little bit extreme, so let's just select that, turn the strength down to 0.15. Yep, looks cool. Okay, let's start doing the same with our other bones. So we're going to use the Y rotation here. We can copy the same modifier over, select our outermost bone and paste. So when here we get that nice sort of, it sort of mirrors the inverse motion of this. So let's just offset this by a load. And do the same on this wing. Y, paste. Let's offset it backwards a bit. Cool. I think the strength of that can come down a bit. Okay, and we've got a bunch of keyframes. That's great. We're just going to name our armature here over in the outliner by hitting F2. I'm just going to call this bird 1. And the mesh I'm going to call, let's just call it bird mesh 1. Bird mesh 1. And this first collection is I was going to call it B1 to be super efficient. Now I'm going to duplicate that collection 4 times. And now we should have a duplicate of everything, including our animations. So when we go into pose mode, we can shift everything along a little bit. Like so. I'm just going to duplicate it so it sort of pops back here. So that looks different. Cool. And with our other one, oops, might be handy to hide a few of these occasionally. Let's jump in. Let's move this way over. So yeah, as you can see, they're very different. And do the same for the final one. Just going to move this a little bit. Actually, what I'm going to do for this final one, I'm just going to scale it and have much more of a glide time. Just scale it down a little, slow it down before it glides. Cool. Okay, so we have our 4 birds with individual animations. So I'm going to select all of these, create a new collection. I'm going to call it all birds and move these into that collection. Now we can move on to creating the flock. There are a number of ways to do this. This is one I quite like because it's nice and importable to other scenes, and there is an element of control as well. So for that, let's just create a new collection, call it particles, and hide our all birds for the time being. Shift A on the keyboard. Let's just go full screen here. Shift A on the keyboard. I'm going to go mesh icosphere. I'm going to select. I'm going to scale it up a little bit, as well as scaling along the Y axis a bit more. This is if you can kind of imagine a bird will be positioned on each vertices. So normally I've seen flocks of birds, they'll stretch out in the direction in which they are traveling a little bit more. So let's add a deform, yes, deform, and displace. Create a new texture. Just call it bird movement. Coordinates, we're going to switch to object. But first let's set up this texture. Jump over to the texture area. Go from image to clouds. Don't need very much in depth. And scale it around a little bit with the adjusting the strength here till you get something that could be quite nice. You'll see how we can tweak it when we go back, but you can see exactly what it's going to do in a second. I'm just going to switch to wireframe mode here, and I'm going to add an empty. I'm going to add a circle here. I'm going to shift click our mesh, hit Control P to parent, and with this empty, I'm just going to set a key, location key from frame 1, jump to the end, grab it, move it back along, let's say the Y, just a little bit. Let's go back like that, and location. In between the 2 keys, I'm just going to set the interpolation to linear by hitting T on the keyboard. So that's just a nice smooth movement. And then on our object, we can select the empty we just created. And now we have this kind of thing. Might be going a little bit fast, not too sure yet. Let's start adding the birds. Okay, so with our deforming mesh selected, let's go to particles, create new particles, emitter's fine. Let's start and end on one. They all fall away. So under physics, we just want none. Okay, it's already looking kind of cool, but we do want to change the lifetime to 250. And instead of showing this halo object here, we want to show collection. And we want to select from all birds and use count. So, as you can see, we've got all manner of things here. We just want the bird mesh. So let's delete everything but the bird meshes. Cool. We also want to hide the emitter and emit from, we can do vertices, we could do volume as well. Just hide the emitter. And we should find our scale and rotate options here somewhere. We want to activate rotation. Let's just choose our global orientation along the Y. And scale, tiny bit of variation in there as well. Okay, let's activate our scene. And then we have a nice kind of flock of birds going on. I think the speed of the deformation is kind of working well for me. Nice kind of separation as well. Now we can create a new collection and just call it bird flock. Move these two into bird flock. And again, hide our all birds. And then whenever we need to add some sort of birds to the scene, we can just import this collection by going to File, Append, or Link. And I'm calling that done. I kind of like this approach because it's controllable as well, because you're looking at a displaced mesh and you can see the kind of motion you're going to get. You can easily append and link in the collection to another file. But one thing I would like to do, which I am investigating, is try and find a way to progressively shift the animation, the scale of the animation, so you don't have to have multiple collections of different armatures with slightly offset timings. So in that way, you know, you could have unique timings for thousands of birds and there wouldn't be any kind of repetition, or you wouldn't see any repetition. But I have yet to find a solution for that. I'm looking into animation nodes, perhaps some geometry nodes. If I do find a solution, I will no doubt update it on my Twitter, which is @LouisDumont. If you would like this file, you can download it from my Patreon, which there is a link in the description. And yeah, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful for somebody, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.